Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Bill. Welcome to tonight's edition of ProjectManagementForum.net, coming to you from yet another hotel room in an undisclosed location. Apologies for being a little slow on getting these videos out. I have a lot of people who've been emailing me saying, Bill, what's up? You promised us ongoing content. I've been able to keep up with the blog, but I've had some issues with the product that my wife and I are bringing to market. Specifically something called EDI. Now, for those of you that aren't in the retail world, I had a large company that was interested in our product, and they said we had to be EDI compliant. I didn't know what that was, so I had to do my research. Now, what EDI is, as I understand it, is just an electronic way for a vendor to communicate with a retailer. Think XML, think schema, and so that's what we've got working. I had to find a vendor. We're now compliant. We're now ready to work with this retailer, so good things on that side. As a reminder, what we're doing on this particular video series is we are focusing on sort of an executive C-suite view of some fairly basic project management principles. You know, a lot of executives find themselves running projects, and all of a sudden they are responsible for a lot of money and a deadline, and it might even be a career breaker, but they just don't have that expertise. They're really good attorneys, they're really good engineers, but they're not project managers. And so what I thought it would be fun to do is to sort of walk through basic project management principles. So what we're talking about today is requirements. Now, when we talk about requirements for a project, we are basically talking about the features that a customer wants. And that's really all we're talking about. So you've got sort of this broad description, which is in the charter, which describes what the customer wants. You've got at the end of the requirements elicitation and the decomposition, which we'll talk about, you have a scope statement. And then those two things should match, right? Because one represents the customer's version of what they want, the other represents the performing organization's version of what they think they want, and those two should match before the project ever gets started. So when we talk about requirements, what we're talking about is sitting down with the subject matter experts and understanding exactly what needs to be delivered as a feature in the project. And what I see a lot of times on projects is people are not very expansive in terms of what they view as a customer. So, for example, if you're doing an IT type project, your core customer is going to be the person that wants you to do the project, right? And they're going to say, well, I'd like this web-based interface. It needs to do A, B, C, D, E. I want it to look a certain way. And those are your requirements. But that's not where it ends, right? Because a website, especially in a large organization, operates within an entire ecosystem. And so you're going to have security requirements, especially if it's public facing. Those security requirements are going to require you to actually talk to the security people. You should always make sure that you keep all of those quote-unquote customers or stakeholders, is the technical term in project management, involved in the requirements elicitation process. Because if you begin to build a project and then you bring them in on the back end, you haven't really baked in their requirements. And so it's super important up front on the project that you in fact make sure you have identified all of your stakeholders, that you have all of your stakeholders engaged, and that you understand what their requirements are up front. If there's a cybersecurity requirement for a website, you need to build that in as a technical requirement. If there's a requirement to use a certain software, then you need to build that in as a requirement. If there's a need to use a certain type of server, if there's a need to use a certain level of encryption, if there's a certain vendor that provides you security in your demilitarized zone, you need to know all of that stuff so that you can bake it in the requirements. Where I've seen projects often go awry is the project manager is actually focused on the customer requirements and they completely forget about the technical requirements. And then 2 or 3 milestones later, suddenly they're trying to get signatures on whatever documentation approval process you've got so that they can get the project moving. And all of a sudden cybersecurity shows up and says, hey, you know, that doesn't meet our requirements. Now you got a problem. Maybe the configuration management people come in and say, yeah, we don't like that technical solution for a server. Maybe the networks people come in and say, yeah, you've asked for a lot of bandwidth here. We really don't have that. So it's always better to think of your customers in terms of business customers and then technical customers. And when you begin your requirements elicitation sessions, and we'll talk about that in the next video, be very expansive in terms of who you describe as your customers. Two reasons. One, it's just really good business. And two, if you've invited them to the meeting and they haven't shown up, and then later they suddenly hold their hands up and say, hey, guess what? I don't like what you're doing. You've got a really powerful tool now because you've got a meeting that they didn't come to and didn't give you the requirements. And that, politically speaking, is a winner for you and a problem for them. Okay, on our next one, we're actually going to go a little bit deeper into what does a requirements elicitation look like. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Talk to you later. Bye.